Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank Steve Flink for those wonderful words. He's been very kind, and he now ranks among the leading historians of our game. And I can assure you it won't be long before he's standing where I am today. I would also like to congratulate all the other inductees, for this is probably for them, as for me, the most important moment of our professional lives. This, for me, is also a very emotional moment, as I will explain. It is now 62 years precisely since I first set foot upon this very tennis court as a member of the combined Oxford and Cambridge team here in the United States to compete against Harvard and Yale for the Prentice Cup. That was a biennial event that dates back as far as 1921. Our host here in Newport that day in 1952 was Jimmy Van Allen, who was already talking of his plans to start a tennis hall of fame here at the Newport Casino, which he did 2 years later. Over the next few years, while competing in the annual Newport tournament here, I got to know Jimmy and his wife Candy very well and saw the beginnings of a museum appear in 1955, the year when inductions began. We also spent time together on his visits to England. One year, Jimmy came over with a book of verse he had published privately, called simply Cambridge. It was a long and beautifully illustrated poem, not quite Hiawatha or Paul Revere perhaps, but nevertheless very impressive, describing every aspect of his life as an undergraduate at Christ's College in those student years when he had played tennis and court tennis for the university. He wanted our help in finding the addresses of old friends to whom he was sending copies of his book. And on another visit, he confirmed that he and the Guggenheim family would pay for the erection of a much-needed fence at Fenner's, the headquarters of tennis in Cambridge, to give us privacy from the cricketers. You know what cricket is? It's that funny game when someone's in and someone's out and you can never work out which. Because their ground lay alongside ours. It was an act of great generosity from which generations of Cambridge tennis players have benefited. As we all know, Jimmy was a very inventive man. His VAS, the Van Allen streamlined scoring system with its sudden death climax at 4 points all, was adapted to become what we now know as the tiebreak. And Jimmy's legacy to Newport, as we've already heard, and as everybody must know, and to the world of tennis, is the magnificent Hall of Fame museum that we enjoy today. Little did I imagine back in 1952 that all these years later, I'd be standing here about to become an exhibit. And to think my mother had always told me not to make an exhibition of myself. Goodness knows what she would have said. Another very emotional moment for me, of course, was 1993, when I sat so proudly over there with our son and daughter watching the ceremony for my wife, Angela, when she was inducted as a winner of 3 of the 4 major championships. At this point, I want to declare my inferiority. Promising as I may have been as a young tennis player, my achievements on court fell far short of hers, and I respectfully bow to her. Although our paths had crossed many times, of course, in the junior days, it wasn't until she had retired from playing singles that we started seeing each other more regularly, and then realized that we wanted to make our partnership a permanent one. Thus, the 3rd of April 1967 is still the most important day in my life. For on that day, we walked down the aisle together at St. Mary's Church in Wimbledon, whose famous spire stands proudly on the Wimbledon skyline, looking down on the All England Club. Each year, on the 3rd of April, I give thanks for the unqualified love, support, and understanding that Angela has given me ever since that joyous day. Without her wisdom and common sense, which have saved me from disaster on more than one occasion, the modest success that I have enjoyed in several fields related to the sport we both love could never have been achieved. From the bottom of my heart, darling, I thank you. Looking back on my life, I realize how lucky I have been at other key moments. First, I was fortunate to have inherited an eye for a ball from my father, himself a fine sportsman, who encouraged me to experience a variety of sports. Aged 8 or 9, I remember acting as a ball boy at his weekly games of tennis in the park with his friends and being allowed to hit the ball for a few minutes when their game was over. Soon, tennis had me in its spell, and I was haunting the park with a school pal, often being chased off the courts by the park keeper because we had no money to pay for the courts. Then I was competing in junior tournaments far and wide with some success. The next lucky break came after my university days, when, with no visible means of support, I was contemplating a year of tennis on the then still amateur circuit. My mother was horrified. "You must find yourself a proper job, darling," she said. But I ignored her entreaties and planned a trip to Australia. A chance meeting in Sydney with the Slazenger chairman, Michael McMaster, led to the offer of employment with the firm. And during the next 34 years, alongside my regular job, I was able to combine a growing interest in writing, broadcasting, coaching, and promotion, some of which you've heard about from Steve. It was a hectic but satisfying period of my life, and I shall always be grateful to Buzzer Haddingham, who succeeded Michael McMaster as chairman, for actually encouraging me to widen my interests. I must also thank Geoffrey Owen, now Sir Geoffrey, the editor of the Financial Times at the time, for giving me my start as a journalist in 1963. Then at the BBC, I'd like to thank all the producers and directors, too numerous to name individually, who allowed me to develop my own broadcasting style. I'm also grateful that my career as a writer and broadcaster took place during the years either side of the arrival of open tennis in 1968. A truly historic moment in our sport, so that I was able to comment on the momentous changes that took place over the next few years. It is very humbling to realize that today I shall be joining in the Hall of Fame some of the media colleagues who contributed articles for me during those 34 World of Tennis years. Among them are those legendary writers, Alison Danzig, David Gray, Lance Tingay, Gianni Clerici and Gene Scott, and writer-broadcaster Bud Collins. It's wonderful to see you here today, Bud, with so many other Hall of Famers who are all old friends. In my life as a broadcaster, I learned so much from my mentor, Dan Maskell, who became a Hall of Famer in 1996. And I often found myself in the next commentary box to one of last year's inductees, Cliff Drysdale, whose work I've always admired. For all of us, it is this wonderful game of tennis that brings us all together. And it is here at the International Tennis Hall of Fame, where the game's history is captured. It is Jimmy Van Allen we must salute, for without his vision and energy, none of us would be here today. And as we celebrate this Diamond Jubilee of the Hall of Fame, how proud Jimmy would have been to see how his brainchild has grown to become the magnificent museum that it is today. And he would fully have approved the ambitious plans for expansion which you've heard about. So in his honor, and remembering Jimmy's love of verse, I have penned the following piece and called it A Dream Fulfilled. Van Allen was the man who had the vision to honor all the champions of our game. The product of his laudable ambition was Newport's honored Tennis Hall of Fame. And so for 20 years the names were garnered. Those early US heroes, in they came. First Campbell, Sears, May Sutton, William Larned, inducted in the Tennis Hall of Fame. In 1975, the board instructed, it's time to recognize the worldwide game. So British star Fred Perry was inducted in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. The years since then have seen the ranks expanding, as every mighty champion you could name has now had recognition for their standing in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Contributors whose work has been outstanding were recognized name after famous name, as one by one they made a graceful landing in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So let us all salute successive chairmen whose stewardship has kept alive the flame that gives such lasting pleasure now to all men at the International Tennis Hall of Fame. If I have learned anything after a lifetime involved in so many aspects of tennis, it is that the game itself is the thing that captures the imagination. Anyone who has ever competed at any level, however humble, will recognize that burst of adrenaline that sets the pulse racing at match point. Any fervent fan who has watched his hero or heroine saving break point with an impossible winner down the line will know the thrill of another chance. Those of us who have written about or commentated on a match won by a man on the edge of exhaustion, like Novak Djokovic was when, through sheer willpower, he overcame Rafael Nadal in their epic 5-hour, 53-minute battle that decided the destiny of the 2012 Australian Open. All will recognize that the human spirit can rise to extraordinary heights. There is a majesty about great matches on great occasions that has been perfectly captured in a short verse by Sir Henry Newbolt. One that many of you may recognize because his inspiring words have been adopted by the 45 worldwide international tennis clubs as perfectly expressing all that is best about our noble game, whose details are so beautifully captured for posterity here in Newport. To set the cause above renown, to love the game beyond the prize, to honor, while you strike him down, the foe that comes with fearless eyes, to count the life of battle good, and dear the land that gave you birth, and dearer yet, the brotherhood that binds the brave of all the earth. Long live the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Stand right there, John. Stand right there.
Do I take this one? Whoop. That's it.
John, on behalf of the Executive Committee and the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and with your wife as a witness, I'm pleased to present this certificate to you, which symbolizes your official induction as a member of the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you mind
That's
holding
yours.
that one?
I got that.